Listen, why don't we start here? Why don't you introduce yourself, introduce ethical equity and AI simulator? That's a good place to start.
Yeah, no, sounds good. So obviously, I'm Ali Kazmi. I'm the founder of two technology companies, Ethical Equity, which is started off as a online investment platform for the underserved communities to raise capital. Somewhat has now become an ecosystem within itself because of the problems and the barriers that we have encountered and faced. And AI Simulator, funny enough, I was actually born out of the experience from Ethical Equity. I do have a co-founder on that, Saj. But AI Simulator is, or was, should I say, because we're currently going through another iteration, an education platform and a simulation platform for first-time founders and aspiring angels to learn everything about private markets. But where it is now, the next version, it's more about for founders, how do you break down your business in a good way into key components and then build it back up so that you are more attractive to investors? But not only that, does your proposition actually make sense before you go around spending tons of time on your business and realize that it's not going to get anywhere? So getting that early validation is quite key. And that's where we are now heading towards.
For sure. And you picked up some pretty good clients for this, right? It's distributing out into the US, and you've got some clients here in the UK for that, right?
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, I won't start reeling off names, but essentially, we were quite lucky to be working with some real big institutions, for that matter, that are leading either on the angel investment side or on the founder side. So, being able to serve both, I think it's been beautiful, and that journey, for once in my life, has been one that I'm enjoying at the moment.
It feels like you've sort of started to get that inflection point in that proposition. Do you think this is a change in kind of the way people look at providing support? Because the traditional model of incubators was, well, we'll put some desks in a room and somebody will turn up every week and do some kind of session. We'll get the local bank manager in to talk about how to be a business. Do you think this is a change in the way people are looking at supporting founders? And do you think well, what do you think's driving that? What do you think's going down?
I think scalability is the key word there. I think, especially some of the bigger institutions that we're talking to. Yes, they have their own investor readiness programs and get X amount through the door, but that's it. If it's all offline, how many people can you get into a room? You're limited in that sense. And I think now institutions are finally turning the corner and adapting or accepting that technology has to play a key part in this in order to get more numbers through the door, as it were. So, how do you go from, say, 500 founders coming through your door to 2,000? Yes, you could probably go through to a football stadium, but I don't think that's going to help. But
Well,
having
I think that's fascinating because I think most programs were kind of 10 founders and 20 founders, and you're already talking about 500 founders, 1,000 founders. Like, it's a much bigger cohort, and you're delivering a very specific intervention, I think, which is interesting. I want to, because people will want to know about you. You're having to eat your own dog food, right? Because you're a founder yourself, so you have that thing of you've been on this journey. You've been on this journey a couple of times, a few times. So the question is, we wrote this down, and it's probably the most interesting thing for me. What on earth possessed you to give up having a proper paid job and do this instead?
yeah, we could all laugh about this, but yeah, it's I mean, so I think this. Look, I don't want to sit here and say to you, I masterminded everything. In fact, what the pandemic hit, and I was forced into entrepreneurship, and that's the honest truth. So I lost my job. Actually, I was one of the ones being made redundant within the tax world. So as you know, before starting into entrepreneurship, I was an advisor to a number of startups, and particularly around tax and SEIS and EIS, making sure the deals are done and the due diligence was done. Then the pandemic hit, and then it kind of forced me into entrepreneurship. I did, try to, as anybody does, you lose a job, try to apply for a number of other roles, and then quickly realized I was getting nowhere with it. So, but it has always been in the pipeline. So ethical equity was always in the pipeline. The question always was, when was the right timing to leave my job to do it full time? So the pandemic just forced it. It just catapulted that journey, bought it, a lot sooner than expected. At the time, I also had two very young or newborn twin boys at the time. So, so it was the worst time to start the business in my life, in my personal life, and that's how it happened. So because I wanted to stay within the specialism that I had, and that was within the early stage investment space, and that's what I knew at the time. So I thought, I want to build a platform around that space. And at the time, and I could, hold my hands up and say, honestly, I did not know what I was about to encounter on that journey. For me, it was, I was doing all these fancy deals, the VC money was flowing in, big angel investment was flowing into these founders. But for what was waiting for me was a real kick in the teeth. And if somebody had told me that my journey is about to be this, I would have had second thoughts or and not pursued it.
I mean, you and I both have a similar attitude towards this. I think one of the things I dislike about the startup world is this misrepresentation of the kind of tech bro who, does a few months worth of building a piece of technology and then goes off and raises 10 million and goes on a journey to become a multi-billionaire. And it's such a statistical anomaly as it's just like mis-selling, right? It's like lying to founders. That's what your journey is going to be like. That's a lie. I think you're far more representative. I mean, I've been around this boy a few times, and I think the journey that you're talking about, first of all, thank you for your honesty, because I think honesty is sort of lacking a bit in the startup market. But also, I think it's good for people to hear that that's the real version of the truth, right? It is a kick in the teeth. It isn't easy. There isn't money flowing freely through the streets of the UK or the US, actually, for startup founders. You followed a very lean process towards delivering your kind of your business. So you didn't go and get 10 million from somewhere and hire a room full of devs and sit there in a managing director's office pretending to be brilliant. So I just really kind of wanted to ask you, having gone that way, what would you now recommend to Ali of 2020? What are the things that have worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? What are the pitfalls? What would you recommend to people coming into being a founder now?
I think that's a great question. And this is something that I now continue to share with my mentees when I do mentor them on various different programs. And one of the let's put it into perspective first. I think 99% of ideas never get off the ground because of, founders over engineering, over complicating the thing that they think that they need, but actually, there's no validation behind that. So I think one of the good things that I did was validate the idea before I started looking at, the prospect of building it out. So even if it was going to some of the industry leaders and saying, look, and look, one thing about founders is that, we're always protective of our ideas, but actually I think you need to loosen up a bit, or I think the industry needs to loosen up a bit, where nobody's out there to steal your ideas, right? It's the passion that drives the idea forward, not just an idea being an idea. We all know that falls over very quickly. But what I'm saying is that getting whatever thoughts that I had that I wanted to build to industry leaders to say, look, this is what I'm looking to build. What are your views on it? And then taking that as validation and taking that forward. But to your point about the lean situation or the lean approach, I think that is the best approach. Take out your product, whatever shape it is in, to the market for validation, and then iterate on it. Don't go, and I honestly, I did this in my earlier days when I didn't have a product, and this was slightly before. And again, it was good timing when I won the SuperTech West Midlands competition, which is where I am today. And that journey has been tremendous for me in a positive way. As an underserved founder, trying to access capital, trying to access investors, VC, angels. Everybody gives a good talk, but when you knock on their door, that's where the proof is in the pudding. But a lot of us, the statistics show that a lot of us founders never see the capital. But anyways, I think the ultimate position to be in is, as a founder, or for me, was get the minimum viable product out there, get feedback, and then iterate. For me, as I was saying, I went to the software house company, I won't name them, and I told them I want all of these items and these features. Not once did they say, well, actually have a lean approach. Let's get this MVP out to market. But for them, it was, I walked out thinking, there's a 6-figure bill that I need to go out and raise in order to get my product to market. But actually, then the SuperTech West Midlands competition came along with Million Labs. And then that just showed me a whole different way of getting a product to market. And that's where, and I did that with the simulator, for example. We didn't go out and try to raise millions at the back of an idea. It was, we could build a basic MVP ourselves. It became so sophisticated. Even a dummy like me can play around with Bubble in this day and age. And then we were then able to prove the model and then go to investors and say, look, we've proven the model. We've got the data. We've got the revenue. Now we need investment to build out the proper MVP. And that's the approach I've always taken, and I always advise any founder coming through the program.
See, I think that's fascinating, because I think a lot of founders feel like, first of all, they need to be a big professional business hiding behind a big professional brand with a big professional product. And I think inevitably that leads to a lack of honesty about themselves, right? And you can smell it a mile away when somebody comes to you and says, we're brilliant and we're amazing, and you think there's just you hiding behind this and you're terrified. Whereas when someone comes to you and goes, look, I'm a startup and I've done this and I think it solves your problem, immediately that honesty makes you want to help them grow their business, right? So I think that approach is great. I think the other thing, though, is I think people don't understand angel investors very well, right? They don't understand that angel investors want to be involved in that journey. They want to have the fun of being involved in solving the problem. And I think you had an inside track on that, because you started working with angel investors more and more, right? You gained an understanding, because that was the market you were targeting to begin with. Do you think that's given you any kind of advantage, or do you think there's anything you learned from that journey that kind of demystified investment for you?
Yeah, and I think we did the opposite thing as a typical founder, where they often run after the founder market because it's a lot easier to tap into. So we did the opposite. So we actually went to angel investors and focused on them and said, yeah, exactly. We told them they're the problem, in deploying the capital. But actually what came out from that was then actually, yes, we need to solve our way of thinking and how we deploy capital, but actually we need to be aligned a lot more with the founders. So how do you also then get the founders to align how investors are thinking, and vice versa? Usually there's a mismatch somewhere. Yes, people are always running after the money, but actually you need to understand what the angel investor ultimately wants. And once you've understood that, then you work backwards from that and then see, okay, are we a good fit? Because we all hear the horrendous stories that are out there, right? People have run after the money, they got the money, and then realize that actually they're not a good fit with the angel investor, and realize that they have to give up, or they've been forced out, or for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out. But helping, and also there's the other side of the equation as well, where you got people that are desperate to come into the market as angel investors because historically they've been neglected. They haven't had the chance to deploy their capital. So I think, what we understood is that, yes, there is substantial amount of untapped money and wealth in the UK that hasn't been deployed, or that hasn't been unlocked, purely because they haven't had access to these exclusive networks where deal flow starts from and then ultimately ends up. Therefore, because they haven't been around those tables, they haven't had the chance to deploy their money.
They don't get a chance to play. I think it's fascinating because we haven't said AI simulator doesn't, it's not artificial intelligence. It stands for angel investor. That's where you started, right?
Correct.
And so you end up with this brand which seems really on point, when AI suddenly starts booming. But I think that thing of being the translating entity, because you were training angel investors and you were training startups, and you were sort of acting as the kind of Google Translate of those two groups of people, which I think is fascinating. I think, we have this thing in being startup founders of putting any kind of investor on a pedestal and saying, I think they know everything, right? And they don't. They're just as terrified as you are, and vice versa, right? So I think, I think there are a lot of investors out there. In fact, I know there are a lot of investors out there that, their thesis is based on a blog post from the US that they read from 5 years ago that's told them that the math works out like this. And they've got no relevant data, relevant data to the UK, no relevant data to pin their thesis on. So I've heard people say, oh, I think I need to invest in 17 companies to get a return. I'm like, where the fuck did that number come from? Where have you pulled that out of?
Exactly. You make a very valid point, and this is where we're trying to disrupt the industry at its core. So we are trying to move everything to metrics based. And you're right. Every angel investor that I've spoken to, they're always banging on about metrics, but actually, when you look at how they actually invest, they ultimately look at who the founder is and do they buy into that founder. So what we're trying to do is, or the new version is trying to do, it's a bit like a credit score system for founders and for angel investors. And then through data, we then ultimately want to see that is the founder, or, are they hitting the right level of scoring? Does that match with what the angel investor has put in their thesis? And therefore, then I'm matching exactly based on data. Because at the moment, whatever the number is, I think you need to knock on 60 doors before you get a yes. There's a lot of time wasted in between that. So if we can then make that very quick and it's all data driven, then hopefully it's far more accurate as well. So it's a bit, so that's where we see the ultimate transition and the long-term vision for AI simulator is that data-driven piece where founders, they can deconstruct their business, get a decent score on it, and continue to build on it and build their score, a bit like a credit score system. And then you got angel investors or the aspiring angel investors that want to build their thesis that has something meaningful behind it, and then they meet somewhere in the middle through data.
And that makes sense to me. I guess, the final thought I want to pull out of your head, I don't think you're like any other founder. One of the reasons I like you is because I think you are actually the setup that founders should be. I think you're patient, you are kind, you are very driven by your kind of moral fiber. And I love the fact that you baked ethics into, the branding of your estate, right? It's right there in the heart of you. You look for ethical investment, you will find Ali Kazmi, right? Which I think is wonderful. We know that there's issues in the market, right? We both know we're both fighting that fight. I just wonder, what do you think? You're at the heart of this. I'm at the heart of this now. What do you think the next few years look like in startup land? What do you think is going to need to be done to make the changes that we need to make this a more ethical space, a more moral space? Where do you think that puck's going?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, and thank you for the praise, by the way. I'm a humble person. I'm trying to be humble, but I think ultimately, if you want innovation, I think access to capital is always going to be key, and unlocking communities, I think, is the way forward. The talk is cheap, as you and I know that. There's a lot of noise on social media about X amount has been earmarked for certain communities, but that capital never actually gets deployed. What you see is that, it's not the money that's ultimately the issue. And what we found is actually the lack of knowledge and getting people back to the start line, or at least the founders back to the start line, so that they can then run a fair race. We talk about investor readiness. Ultimately, what does that actually mean, investor readiness? And then you got certain programs that cut people off because they charge X amounts that founders from my community simply can't afford. So I think all the data that you look at it, however you want to scrutinize it, it all points towards, if you want innovation, make it more diverse and inclusive, you will certainly get innovation there. So I think if the trend continues, I think, there are genuine players. I'm not here to slate anybody in particular, or anyone for that matter. I think, if they can get to the bottom of deploying that capital fairly into underserved founders collectively, whatever that might look like, then I think innovation, you're about to unlock some major innovation. And I think that's where it should be going. And I think we need to get off this bandwagon of, can we find the next unicorn? I think sustainability needs to be at the heart of it. Yep. Even if it's, generating revenue and it's not getting your 1000x or 100x, that's fine. As long as it's moving forward and it's growing, it's creating jobs, it's creating the revenue, and it's profitable, I think that's far more better for the economy as a whole, and more stability, rather than, the one trick pony, or just trying to get that one that's going to outstrip all the other portfolios and pay for it all. So I think getting out of that habit, I think, is going to be key. And then obviously you got your buzzwords like AI, machine learning, and everything else.
That's wonderful. But I think that's a really valid point, right? I think we're living through another period of time. I'm old, and therefore I remember when the internet became the thing that was going to enable all the future technology businesses, and just a massive guiding phrase in every pitch. Oh, we're going to go on the internet. And then there was mobile. We're going to go on mobile and make an app. And now we've got AI, and that has become part and parcel of every pitch. So it's sort of uninteresting. Yes, it is an enabling technology. It will be in everything. Got it. What is it? Who's got a problem, and how are you solving it? And
also, just on that point, though, quite importantly, I think you just have to be very careful with the data that sits behind the AI. Obviously, we've all seen the horror stories that come out of that. So if people are training it with bad data, then obviously you're going to get bad outputs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just going back to the beginning of this and I absolutely buy your initial thesis, which was you need to find those investors that are looking to invest ethically, that can deploy their money. I mean, I'm fed up of programs that say, oh, we're a program that's going to help this group of people, but really what we are is an access to finance program with no investment at the end of it. It doesn't help to tell people, oh, we'll help you get investment, if you're not actually getting them investment, just riling people up. So I think we both get frustrated with that. But if you can find those people that are patient capital, that are investing in ethical outcomes, that are trying to drive at doing something different, I think that unlocks. There is absolutely no value in continuing to do the same thing over and over again. We're getting the same boring pitches because we're not looking into wider communities that understand the pain statements outside of the mainstream. I think we're leaving an enormous amount of talent and innovation on the table because of that.
Absolutely. And just one final thing that I would say on that, and this is where SuperTech, West Midlands, and Greater Things are doing things differently, right? So it's not, talk is cheap. It's not just saying, come through our program and in the hope that you might get something at the end of it. It's about, we put money into you. Here's your product. Now take it to market. And you're launching businesses, and that's the difference from what other programs do and what you guys do at SuperTech West Midlands. It's you put your money where your mouth is, and I can genuinely say, when I'm first time, my journey has been somewhat turbocharged by the fact that what SuperTech West Midlands did for me and the exposure that I got from it. Being able to iterate and find, I'm a founder of a couple of technology businesses, but actually what it's not a barrier. It wasn't, oh yeah, go to your traditional coding and then you get stuck and the product never ever gets to market. It's a novel way of validating your idea very quickly, and not at a fraction of a cost. So, and you could still make the same amount of returns that you could with a traditional business. And just on that, and just a very quick plug-in is, AI Simulator is also raising its seed round as well. So if there are any VCs watching this and you want to make an impact, then please do reach out. We are looking to raise our 1.1 million seed round in the UK, ideally. So if anybody can help, we love your support.
Excellent. Where should they email? Where should they get in contact?
Great question. Yes, they should email Ali at aisimulator.co.uk, or contact me on LinkedIn or however, any other means.
There'll be a link attached to this. Listen, I mean, my thesis has always been, if you can get people live quickly, that you will then find out whether the idea has got any kind of legs, but also whether the founder has. And I'm really pleased that you were the first person that we put through SuperTech Seeds. By the way, SuperTech, Birmingham City University and the West Midlands Combined Authority would like to thank you for saying the West Midlands and SuperTech so often during this interview. But you were the first person we put through that as a trial. And I couldn't be more overjoyed that turned out the way it did. You are you are literally the archetype of what I wanted to see from people that went through that program.
And also, just final word for me, and I'll keep saying that, but there's a lot that's
another hour of final words.
Yeah. And one thing I would say is that the ambition has been huge, right? Even though you built this MVP for us. Now, where I am today, I've recently come back from a trip from the US, and that wouldn't have been possible had I not won the SuperTech West Midlands competition in the first place, because it set the motion of entrepreneurship into play. And it's the journey now. So even doing deals in Silicon Valley, we work with Founder Institute, for that matter, which is headquartered in Silicon Valley. Now our product is used by them. So that just because it's a low code, it doesn't put us at a disadvantage. If founders are thinking that where they're leaning towards traditional code because they might miss out or whatever the case might be, our product is being used in Silicon Valley and in other places, and it's low code.
That's amazing. Ali, listen, we've timed out. Thank you so much for giving us this time today. I really appreciate it. I love working with you. You're one of my favorite people on earth.